Have I been transported to 1999? Hi guys, Eric here and welcome back to my channel. Today we will be having a look at this 2011 Renault Sandero 1.6 Expression. This is the car that started the B segment size for A segment money craze, and for that it deserves your appreciation.
A really big thank you to the accommodating, thoughtful and helpful staff here at ASJ Motors. They have a huge selection of quality used cars located in two locations in the Overberg region. One is in the industrial area of Hermanus, the other is located on the main road of Verliesdorp. They are open for business, so be sure to check out their catalogue, link in the description box below.
If you live in the Western Cape and you have an original car in good condition you would like me to review, please get in touch. There's an email address in the description box below. That Renault badge is actually a bit misleading. It is really a car make by Romanian car manufacturer Dacia. Dacia was established in 1966 and built Renault 8s under license as the Dacia 1100 from 1968 to 1972. Then, in 1969, it started production of the Dacia 1300, essentially a rebadged Renault 12. It continued production with many facelifts until 2004. 35 years of basically the same design. Dacia was bought by Renault in September 1999, with Renault seeing the Romanian company as a great entryway into the Eastern European market. At first, they integrated Renault parts into their existing models such as the Supernova and the Silenza, which boosted sales considerably. But all this was merely to prepare the workforce for the first real alliance, the Logan. The Logan, a four-door sedan, began production in 2004. Doesn't sound too interesting, but it would become the best-selling car in Romania, with 43% of all Dacias in Romania being the Logan. It was exported to many other markets, including South Africa, although it wasn't as successful here. Personally, I always thought there was something rather off about its styling, particularly the rear. I wasn't the only one who thought so, as it received quite a lot of criticism. It didn't matter though, as the Logan was the launching pad for a whole myriad of cars. The Sandero was released by Dacia in 2008. It is essentially a hatchback version of the Dacia Logan. However, the Sandero has a slightly longer wheelbase. Looks-wise, I am not completely convinced. It is by no means ugly, but much like the Logan, its proportions seem a bit off. Not by too much, thankfully. This Expression trim has to make do with steel wheels and plastic door mirrors and door handles, but the champagne color does really help to make it look upmarket. The rear lights mimic those of the Mark II Corsa, and the front has a distinctive Dacia face, for better or for worse. What is the interior like? Considering the prices that these cars went for when they were new, I'm actually quite impressed with its interior. Even though this is actually a Dacia, you can see Renault parts everywhere. While the general feel might be a bit bog and basement and the general look is dated AF, there's something quite attractive about it. These air vents are prime examples of being cheap as well as cheerful. Even though there aren't any shiny trim pieces to brighten it up, it is circular and it has this textured rim. It gives it this macho look that I quite enjoy. My favorite panels, however, have to be these doors. This door panel looks great for a car in its segment. Sure, it is made predominantly out of black plastics. The ergonomics are just a bit off and the armrest is unpadded, but it looks thick and it feels solid. While most of its rivals feel more like paper mache cardboard. You also get this neat fabric trim piece to add some more texture to the door panel, as well as the silver boomerang shape that partially trims the door's grab handle. Now this is the entry-level expression trim, so don't expect any electric windows or door mirrors. Instead, you get this interesting lever that protrudes out of the door card. You can move it in either direction to either raise or lower your windows. You also get this stick that can manually control your door mirrors. How 90s? In all fairness though, I would much rather have ABS than electronic equipment. The door pockets are nice and long, but I find them a tad too narrow, so they're only best suited for your skinnier items. And while the door doesn't have much in the way of weight, it does close with a reassuring thud. The steering wheel is identical to those you might find in Mark II Clios. It looks completely uninspired and bland. It even has this extremely small Renault logo in the middle. You don't get any audio controls either, but expecting that from a car this size and at this price would be a mistake. One very important omission, in my opinion, is the lack of any adjustments in my. This is a mistake, in my opinion, because it really impacts driving comfort. The stalks also feel quite cheap, even for 2008 when this car was released. The stalks are quite intuitive though, and I thoroughly enjoy the interesting shape. The dials must be one of my favorite aspects of the Sandero. It is extremely easy to read, with red backlit digits on a sporty white background, accompanied by just as sporty red needles. It is all-person friendly because the digits themselves are massive. In between the two analog dials, you will find a blackout LCD display that communicates total distance traveled as well as trip A information. It also displays a digital fuel and water temperature gauge. No trip computer though, but I much prefer two airbags than trip information. Below the LCD display, you'll find a little box with a couple of warning lights, again reinforcing the idea of this car coming out of the 90s. The center console is really simplistic. This massive silver piece that frames the stereo unit, the hazards button, and the climate controls might look a bit naff by today's standards, but it was par for the course in its time. 8 years before this car was released. This particular car has an aftermarket stereo unit, but the standard fit sound system is, it makes a sound, so that's good. In all seriousness, it's really not that bad considering there's only 2 speakers firing. These climate controls come straight out of a Dacia Logan. They feel quite cheap to use, but I have felt much worse in much more expensive cars, so I can forgive it for that. The gear lever, much like the steering wheel, is straight out of a Mark II Clio, and I've always found its shape rather interesting. These seats are as basic as they come. But I kind of like this design pattern they have on it. It just adds a bit to the general ambiance in here. The driver's seat is height adjustable, which is great, but the seats feel flat and not that comfortable actually. I'm already experiencing some lower backache. Turning to the practical side of things. When it comes to storage, the glove box it's huge. It is extremely deep. You get 2 cup holders as well, but I wouldn't trust them with much as they are way too shallow and the climate controls are in the way of taller containers. Thankfully, there's a slightly deeper cup holder behind the handbrake. There's also a tray below the handbrake that can't really store much because handbrake. Thankfully, the door pockets are of an adequate size. So, all in all, not so good. Get in the back and things aren't that great either. Knee room is quite scarce and headroom isn't much better. The Sandero is quite wide though, so shoulder room isn't much of an issue. The rear bench is raised slightly above the front and the window line is really low, so you get an excellent view out. Storage is almost non-existent though. There's only one single cup holder and it will be filled with the driver's drink most of the time. The boot really makes up for it by being a very reasonable size of 320 litres. You even get a full-size spare wheel as well as 2 grocery hooks. The rear seats fold surprisingly flat. The only thing is it only folds down in one piece, hampering practicality just a bit. There's also a slight ridge present as well as a low boot lip, but these are minor niggles. The boot is thoroughly impressive. When it comes to reliability, the Sandero performs really well. There were some reports of loose trim pieces, but that was mostly due to unfastened screws. Electrical bugbears were mostly located to electric window switches as well as electric mirror switches. Thankfully, parts are quite inexpensive when it comes time to replace them. One thing to keep in mind though is that all the engines uses cam belts as opposed to cam chains, and cam belts need replacing every 100,000 kilometers. Now with all this out of the way, what is the driving experience like? Well, it does a lot of things well and other things not so well, so let's start with the positives. Driving the Sandero around town is actually nice and easy thanks to light pedals, excellent all-round visibility, and soft suspension. The steering is power assisted, but it does feel a bit too stiff in my opinion. The engine does lack a bit of oomph lower down the rev range, so navigating rush hour traffic does require some forward planning. Lastly, at least on the Expression model, there are no parking aids, so the aforementioned visibility becomes of utmost importance. Out on the open road, and the Sandero performs rather well, especially considering its segment. The suspension is really comfortable, and I'm surprised by the lack of road and tyre roar that enters the cabin. The engine is strong enough to keep up with traffic, but overtaking can be stressful, so make sure that there is more than enough space between you and the big vicious killer truck coming from the opposite lane. The seats are also rather flat and uncomfortable, so after long distance journeys, you might find yourself feeling like a 90-year-old. Out on the twisties, and there is a definite trade-off for the comfortable ride. A lot of body roll. That, combined with the relatively flat seats and completely lifeless steering, makes for a less than fun experience. It must be said though, very few of its rivals can do any better. If you're in the market for the Sandero, it's a good idea to keep an eye out for a Ford Figo, as it has a diesel option and it has better dynamics. Another rival would be the very popular VW Polo. It has a beautifully built cabin and a very decent badge. It is worth mentioning though that a lot of these examples have much higher mileages than the Sandero. I wasn't really expecting much from the Renault Sandero. This is probably why it has left me rather impressed. There are some rough edges present, but you can forgive it thanks to the great value. Now personally, I would instead go for the Volkswagen Polo, only because of its vast dealer network, excellent built cabin, as well as great resale value. The only thing is, finding one in good condition at a low price does require some hunting. So, happy hunting! Thank you so much for watching another one of my videos. If you enjoyed it, please remember to give it a thumbs up, as it makes the world of difference to my channel. If you haven't already, remember to subscribe and get notified of upcoming videos. I have very exciting things coming up, so stay tuned. If you're a bit more interested in behind the scenes content and a peek into my personal life, be sure to follow me on my social media platforms. The links are in the description box below. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Until next time, bye.